Talk Shoes. Recorded live.
All right. Good evening, everybody. It is Saturday, September 17th, 2016. We got a great call tonight. So you guys that are called in, hit *6 to mute out so we don't get a bunch of background noise except for you, Monty.
Okay.
You just kind of stay there and just hang back. But *6 or you hit mute on your phone, whatever, so we don't get a bunch of background noise that'll disrupt everything. So, all right. So, if you have a question when we're ready we'll get to that later. Never mind. So tonight we're here with one of our new mentors at youhavetheright.com. This is we're here tonight with Monty Montgomery, who also goes by the pen name of Augusta. Oh my God. What's the pen name, Monty?
Augustus Blackstone is one of them.
That's it, Augustus Blackstone. I should have known that. It slipped my mind for a moment. So he goes by Augustus Blackstone. He wrote the infamous book called The Errant Sovereign's Handbook, which has been wildly popular, and a lot of people have read it. And so Monty has pretty well demonstrated through his book that he kind of knows what he's talking about. And what I'd like to do, Monty, is maybe if you can tell people just a little bit about yourself, your background, just so they know where you're coming from, and then we can get right into it.
Well, I will preface that by saying, with a question, whether or not people are interested in watching a football game or actually being on the field playing it.
Most of the people on this call are playing it.
I can keep you busy all night with war stories. Let's just say I've had a lot of interaction with the system, and I don't regard quote unquote the authorities. These are just ordinary people trying to do a job that they don't understand. They don't know the basis for what they're doing. They just want a paycheck. So my main thrust has been to try and educate them so that they can do their job responsibly. And when I wrote the book, that was just the first book, as I mentioned to you earlier. I also put out another work with permission of the heir of the author of it. It's called The Final Solution to Property Taxes. You can fill people in on that later. And then the second volume of the Errant Sovereign's Handbook was titled The Sovereign, the System, the Interface. And it gets into a little bit more detail. But the main thrust of these books was not to try and educate people on how to fight the system. It was mostly to instruct them on how to think and act like the sovereigns are supposed to be, so that they can correct. We have a broken machine. We have a broken government. And it's up to us to fix it and fix it correctly. And I think it's in Volume 1, the statement that what this country has become is not an accurate measure of what it started out to be.
Exactly.
So if something is broken, I don't care if it's a country, a marriage, or whatever, the idea is, the old school is, you don't throw it away, you fix it.
Exactly.
So that pretty well sums up, other than just I've had a lot of interaction with the system, with police officers, with judges, with what I call bar maggot attorneys. And I don't call them maggots disparagingly. I call them that, and I call that to them to their face. I call them maggots for descriptive accuracy. Because the function that they perform in society is very similar to the function that actual fly maggots perform in nature. and that is that they consume dead things so life can renew itself.
It's an interesting philosophy.
Well, it's right there in front of us. All we got to do is look at it.
Yeah. Bar maggot. All right. So what did you want to talk about tonight? Do you have anything in particular?
Well, I prefer when I'm dealing with groups of people, I prefer to let them just start out with questions, because a lot of this information you pretty much have to tailor to what they want, what their needs are. In other words, I have to find out what's needed and wanted. I could just spew off on things that have no relevance to what people are really wanting to hear.
Okay. All right. So with that said, if anybody would like to speak up, hit *8 on your phone so that we can have a dialogue here. So if you've got a question or comment or something, hit *8. Chirp, chirp. Okay, nobody's speaking up.
Well,
so I will.
What about your police officer, the funny one?
Well, she's not *8ing right now, so I'm going to respect that. The one thing in the book that I read that really caught my attention, Drew Dash, I'll get to that in a little bit, was property taxes.
Right.
You gave this this kind of formula for eliminating property taxes, and I'm from the book, and I'm curious, since you've written the book, have you found that to be more theory than anything, or has that actually been practical with a number of people in eliminating their property tax?
Well, let's see. I'll go through my mental catalog here. I'll preface that. Typically, when I go into court, I don't take any notes. I do everything out of my head. And it's pretty much spontaneous. I remember one case where some people asked for my help. I believe it was in Arkansas. They had a bank coming after them for. They actually had two banks coming after them on foreclosure. They had a bank coming after them. We're getting an echo there.
I took care of it.
Okay. The way we dealt with one of the banks was what they demanded, what you give them. You have to remember, everybody's operating under the UCC now. And that's not law. And in fact, the courts have structured their rules under the UCC. So if whatever you do, it's not what you say, it's what you do. And if you conform what you do to the UCC, they have no grounds to come back on you. So what we did in this case, it had not gone to court yet. The bank simply demanded they wanted their money, and I think it was $151,000 or something like that. And all they had was the numerical characters prefaced with a $sign. And there's no legal definition for any of the $signs, whether it's got a single bar, double bar, ticks at the bottom and the top. None of those symbols have a legal definition. So I told these people, I said, well, if they want $151,000, I'm just going to peg a difference here. It was $151,000, say 302, and .02. And so I told them, I said, they had a computer they could work with, so I said, I want you to print out in probably about 10 or 12 point type font. I want you to print out $151,303 $signs. Then you send them a very nice cover letter and say, since you have there's no legal definition for the symbol, and your demand is that you want 151,302.02 of these symbols, that's what we are giving you. We're giving you exactly what you demanded. And you can keep the change because we give you a little bit extra. And that case went away. They never heard from the bank again.
Did they get title?
I never followed up to find out. That's all they asked me for was how to make the bank go away, and I told them.
Okay.
In another instance, the mortgage, they were using the all caps name in the. They were in court on that one, and they were named as a party in all caps. And I said, "Do you print, sign, or write your name in all caps?" And they said, "No." And I said, "Well, then who is this party that they're bringing this suit against?" I said, "We don't know." So we took it from that viewpoint that they weren't the party. And that went on for a while, but then they put in exhibits on the mortgage contract, and their names are on the mortgage contract, but it's in title case. Their names do not appear on that mortgage contract anywhere in all caps. And the promissory note that secured that mortgage contract was likewise up there, title case. But what they promised in the promissory note was payment back to the bank in lawful money to the United States. Well, that's got a very exact definition.
Right.
Legally. And which is essentially gold and silver coin. So I told him, I said, you put in interrogatories asking them to state whether or not they were loaned lawful money of the United States. Now, bear in mind that you can alter that by agreeing through contract law to something else. And there are federal court cases on that to support that. In other words, you have the authority to sidestep the law contractually. And a good example of that in, just a plain traffic case or, a misdemeanor case or something like that in the courts, in the state courts, they will inform you that you have the right to an attorney, and if you can't afford one, the court will appoint one for you. They always end that with a question: do you want the court to appoint you one? They can't compel you to take an attorney to represent that fiction. They have to get your agreement. They have to get your authority to do that. That's why they're asking the question. So to kind of bring this into perspective on multiple applications beyond traffic is anytime anyone puts themselves, their agent, i.e. an attorney, or their paper in front of you, they want something from you. What they want from you, they don't have, or they wouldn't be there. So it's up to you whether you want to give it to them or not. Even if a child comes up and pulls on your sleeve, they want something from you. It doesn't matter if they want your time, your affection, your attention, whatever. They want something from you that only you can provide. And it's up to you whether you provide it or not. That's pretty fundamental. And it works the same way with all these supposed, George Washington described them as impostures. We have a bunch of corporations linked together that are pretending to be government.
Yeah.
That's what he was talking about, was imposters. They're imposters.
Yeah.
So if you understand that, if you understand what you're dealing with, then a whole lot of ideas and things come to mind without instruction from someone like me. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Just like the dollar sign thing. If they demanded dollar signs, that's what we give them.
Would you recommend that for various taxes?
You could. I can give you another war story. One of my mentors, many, many years ago, he was the county sent him a tax bill. They didn't even have a dollar sign. All they had was numerical characters on the bill. So he had sheep and goats and chickens and things like that. So he went out and he gathered up. I think the bill was $117 or $127, but supposedly dollars. It just had numbers. So he went out and gathered up that many sheep berries, put them in a plastic baggie, and at least sheep berries have value. If nothing else, it's fertilizer. And
what's a sheep berry?
It's sheep shit.
There you go, folks.
Okay. So he gathered up the 117 or 27 sheep berries, put them in a baggie, and took them down to the county, to the clerk, and with the bill, and said, "You didn't specify what you wanted, so that leaves it up to me what the substance of that demand is, so here it is." And the county accepted it. They gave him a receipt. So there's lots of ways you can go about it. And people say, well, that's pretty literal. Well, why not? If they want something different, let them specify what they want.
Right.
Of course, they're going to have to break the law to do it. But that's what you do. Same thing. Let's take it back to traffic. When you get a traffic citation, I don't know of very many states that don't require you to sign it. Most states do. So you have to ask yourself, if they have the power to compel you, why do they need your dated signature on the document? It's a contract. So if you want to avoid having a confrontation with a police officer that is likely not been trained in the law, and there could be problems, the best way to deal with that is simply put a qualifier on your signature, such as vi et armis. That's Latin. It's VI, 3 words, VIET ARMIS. What it means in English is by force of arms. That means your signature was obtained by force of arms. It means it was coerced, and that voids the contract.
Are you available to take another question?
Sure.
Okay, we do have somebody on the board, but I told this guy I would get to his question. Do you recommend authenticating the birth certificate and claiming ownership?
No, because you didn't create it.
Do you have any first-hand knowledge of it or experience with the distribution of one's estate or registered securities through the Treasury?
Well, I have some knowledge of it, but as far as obtaining proof of it, good luck.
Okay. So now we go to Oregon. We got Genevieve in Oregon, I believe, that is waiting. And she's got a question.
Sure.
Hi, Tad.
Hi, Genevieve. She's going to carry the call tonight.
No, I won't. I don't want to hog it, but I'm so excited to be able to speak with you. Monty, is that it?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi. That's a contraction of my last name.
I figured as much. And but I've been calling you Augustus and Augie since I first read you. So.
Well, that's fine. I'll answer to that too. I answered about 4 or 5 different names.
Oh, well, aren't you flexible?
Yeah.
Hey, you.
Yeah. Call me anything except late for, anyway.
Yeah.
Well, regarding signatures, well, first off, I've just got to tell you, I read your first book a couple of years ago, and really it sparked me into action.
Good.
And I really appreciate it, and I didn't know that you'd written anything else.
Right.
I would be interested in knowing how I could obtain your other 2 books.
Well, for a while somebody put them on the internet for free. They didn't dare do it for money because then I'd have legal grounds against them. And I didn't really have any objection to that because I'm not doing this for the money. You might call it self-preservation. I see my country disintegrating, and I'd rather do what I can do to prevent that or slow it down anyway. But I don't know if they're still available that way on the internet or not. If they're not, then I'll let you set up something with Tad on that. I have made both those books available to him.
Oh, great.
The first one is titled "The Final Solution to Property Tax," and that's another thing that we did actual hands-on. What I recommend in the book, I put some addendums on it, and we did that with a fellow in Washington State, and the bottom line was the county simply removed his property from the tax rolls.
Was that using the technique you discussed in your first book?
Yes. No, not necessarily. It was an expansion on that.
Ah.
Okay. Everything's a process when you're dealing with these people.
Yeah.
So the second volume of the handbook was titled "The Sovereign, the System, the Interface." Volume 2, Aaron Sovereign's Handbook. As I said, if you can't find them on the internet, then you can get them through Tad.
Oh, thank you so much. I will be asking Tad, get ready.
I've got it in front of me.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, let's see. I think the thing that is on my mind is property taxes, but perhaps I'll save my questions for after having read your book. Does that sound like a good idea?
Well, it sounds like it would be more productive.
Okay. Then I'll wait for those questions.
But we're also about entertainment, so go ahead and ask your question.
Well,
yeah, if you have a burning question that simply won't wait.
I've got a whole bunch of them, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, here's a specific question regarding land patent. Wouldn't a land patent wipe out past bond encumbrances, which should have never been on the property?
No, because you can, as I said, you can compromise that through contract. And typically, when you pay cash for a piece of property, in other words, you don't borrow money from a bank on it. The way they've got the real estate law set up, and you have to remember, real estate law. You're in Oregon, right?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know how many states do this, but I know that Oregon does in their ORS paperback publications that you'll find in every library. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, Oregon Revised Statutes.
Right.
Yes.
They're
Okay.
they're in paperback form in virtually every. That's required by law.
Oh.
In every library in the state of Oregon. See, they have to put you on notice so they can say you knew what the law was. Okay? That's why they do that.
Sneaky.
So when you pull out Volume 1, it begins, like many publications, with the preface pages that have little I's and X's and stuff on them.
Right.
Roman numerology.
Yes.
Somewhere in that section, I don't know if they're still doing it or not. They did it for years, and I think I've got a copy of it somewhere on my computer. They have a page in there with a table of titles.
Okay.
And I cover that in the handbook. That table of titles, I know that Idaho does a similar thing. They don't have a convenient table like Oregon does, but Idaho's done the same thing. They categorize their statutes according to subject matter. So the first few chapters of the ORSs are categorized as remedial code. That remedial code is what establishes the remedy, the courts, et cetera, followed by, and there's only like 2 or 3 chapters on that, and then that's followed by the civil code, which is, I believe, 4 or 5 chapters, which is followed by the criminal or penal code. And by the way, criminal and penal are not the same thing. That's probably 2 or 3 chapters. Then all the rest of the chapters, which takes up about 85% of the statutes of the code, are classified as political code. That includes banks, insurance, real estate, counties, et cetera, and there is no enabling authority either in the national constitution or the state constitution. I don't care what state you're in. There's no enabling authority that gives the state or the government, federal or state, the power to compel you or to compel a political choice on you. They don't have that enabling authority. So they have to do it by contract. So typically, the way that's relevant is, have you ever asked yourself why real estate agents, car dealers, doctors, on and on, have to be licensed by the state?
I've wondered.
Okay. A license is permission to do something that would otherwise be unlawful to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is it that they're doing that is unlawful that requires them to be licensed, to which the state is a party?
Collecting fees for the state.
No.
No?
That's a different area of law. What the actual unlawful activity they're engaged in is unlawful conveyance of titles. That also affects the birth certificates. That's why they all need licenses to practice.
Wow.
That covers doctors, lawyers, car dealers, real estate. I mean, all these things are unlawful conveyances of title to which the state is a party.
Well, for example, does a physician unlawfully convey title?
Who signs a birth certificate on that property called a baby?
Oh, okay.
Well, but not all physicians do that.
No, even if you do home delivery, you still have to do the paperwork. They can't get licensed. A midwife cannot get licensed by the state unless they conform to the requirements, which is signing as a witness or whatever, a birth certificate with the state. they've created a title on that baby's body and have conveyed it to the state. That's unlawful. So they have to be licensed to do it.
But not all physicians do deliver babies. So what about the ones who don't, who just are?
Well, like I said, I don't care if it's a midwife or a nurse or just a technician at the hospital. Somebody has to sign that document, creating the title and transferring it to the state.
Oh,
they have to be licensed, or they can't do that. So now you've got the state engaged in an unlawful activity. The way they get around that is they get the parents to sign the same document, which gives them permission.
Oh.
That's the enabling authority. Probably the simplest way to say it, and I think I just said it a while ago, if state authorities do not have the power through the Constitution, they have to get it from you directly through contract. That requires your signature. Because fictions, government's a fiction, just like a corporation, fictions have no memory except the paperwork. That is their memory. So that's why they want you to endorse that memory. Because you're living, you have a real memory. A fiction cannot articulate itself. It can't think. It has no moral values. It doesn't know right from wrong. It can't sign anything. It's a fiction. Only real people can do all those things. It's just like rights. A right is simply a statement of authority. The power is the means by which that authority is given effect or made manifest. So, it's a question of, what authority do you want to give, and to whom?
Okay, and can we bring this back around to?
I was about to do that.
Perfect timing. Okay,
so what's happened is that prior to you buying the property, even if you paid cash for it, is unless you actually bought a piece of property that's the owner still held the original patent on, which is pretty rare these days, there's going to be a chain of title on there, and the previous owners have already signed over, they've already signed documents that gave the county an interest in that property, and an interest in the title to the property. So the process outlined that we did in Washington is bringing that portion of the original land patent forward as an assignment. And then you have to make the offer, because you can't take a piece of property in which the county or the state can prove that they have an equitable interest in the title. You can't just say, well, goodbye, kiss my behind and goodbye and all that. You have to deal with that if you're going to deal with it honorably and as a sovereign. So you have to find out the amount. You go and ask them for a payout statement as to what's owing against that title on that property. And then make an offer to pay it off completely, and they typically will say you can't do that. Why not? Are you compelling? Where's your enabling authority to compel a political choice on me? And of course, under the UCC, once you've made an offer and it's been refused, the obligation is discharged.
Really?
Yeah.
That doesn't seem... Oh, would they have to come back with a counteroffer?
No. It works that way because this country is in bankruptcy.
UCC 3-603.
So when you make an offer of tender, valid, lawful tender, and it's refused, and they will refuse it. It screws up their bookkeeping. They will refuse it, and once it's refused, then you acknowledge that in writing and say, then the obligation is discharged. Goodbye. Kiss my behind.
Well, a valid, lawful tender. What was the wording on that again? If I make an offer,
if they actually give you a payout statement, and I haven't seen that done yet, because they're thinking about future taxes. Now, the thing to remember about this is if you do this successfully, then you are going to have to accept and I say if you can do it successfully because conditions vary from one county to another.
Sure.
There's over 3,600 counties in this country. In Alaska, they're called boroughs, but and I think in Louisiana they're called precincts, but they're still counties. They all have different ways of going about doing things and how they conduct their business. So I can't give you like a silver bullet one, cure-all that's going to work in every single county exactly the same way.
Sure.
So that's why I put the qualifier in there. But the general theme, the legal theory, is still the same. So, in other words, you get them to give you a payout statement if you can get them to do that. Because your position then is to say, well, we can't do that. Why not? Are you saying that I have to remain in perpetual slavery?
Ah.
I believe there's a higher law against that.
Yeah.
And they say, well, why do you want a payout statement? You say, because I want to pay off the debt. I want to pay off the claim. Then, if you get a payout statement, then you can go two different ways with that. You can offer them lawful money, gold and silver coin, and you can do now, if you want to do it that way, then what you have to do is you have to get evidence of the ratio of difference between Federal Reserve note units and lawful money. And the way you do that is you go to the Treasury. They're always selling gold and silver I don't know if they call them replicas, but they sell the gold and silver coins still. And they give you a Federal Reserve note price. The last time I checked that was a lot of years ago. They were selling silver $half for about, I believe it was $41.
Ooh.
Federal Reserve note units, 41.
That has been a while.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was 15. I don't remember now, but it seems like it was 41.
Oh, so close.
Anyway, so we got that as evidence from the United States Treasury that was the ratio of difference between the Federal Reserve note units and lawful money. And we made that adjustment based on their ad for their coins, and then took that amount, which was much reduced, it reduced the amount of lawful money needed, and made an offer to pay off the taxes in that much gold and silver coin, which the states, you have to remember that the Article 1, Section 10 does not apply to us. It does not apply to the people necessarily, and it does not apply to the United States government. It only applies to the states. They're under the disability. And so the states and their political subdivisions cannot compel anything. If you want to voluntarily give them something else, they can accept that. But they can't compel you to pay anything except gold and silver coin. And that's still the law. So,
but because that isn't in circulation, though, doesn't that...
That doesn't matter. It's up to them to see that it gets in circulation. Okay? If you make an offer in the lawful money, they can't accept it because now they're operating on a debit or deficit system, money system. And they can't accept it because it extinguishes the debt. and it screws up their bookkeeping. In other words, their bookkeeping is completely inverted from what it should be. When you throw, well, if you were able to get a silver dollar into the banking system, into their computers, at the speed the computers work, there was some college professor worked out the math on it. He said if one individual was able to get one silver dollar into that system, at the speed with which computers operate, you'd have the national debt paid off in, I think it was less than a week, with one silver dollar.
Wow.
Every time it bounced to another account, it would extinguish $1 of debt. And you figure the speed of computers, that adds up very quickly.
Wow.
So, at any rate, but remember this: when you're doing all this stuff, that you're dealing with people, you're dealing with your local clerks, and police officers, judges, whomever. With these local authorities you're dealing with, they don't understand this stuff, and a lot of them interpret it as being you're just trying to give them a hard time. So they are going to resist you. Okay? And that's why it's important. You can know one thing. It's knowing something and proving it are two different things. If you've done any litigation, you'll figure that out very quickly. So when you go there, you go prepared with your evidence. You say, okay, well, here's what the United States Treasury says. There is a difference between the value of gold and silver coins and Federal Reserve note units. And no court yet has defined the term money. There's lots of money-related court cases, but no court has yet determined the meaning of the word money within the UCC. It isn't there.
Well, what about the Coinage Act of, let's see, what is it,
1792? April 2, 1792.
92, okay. And then there was another one in 62 or 67, 19,
well,
that is?
Something that's worth noting is that you have to remember the powers that were given to Congress, enumerated powers, were not only grants of power, they were actual mandates that they enact legislation to implement the Constitution. So most of the acts immediately following the adoption of the ratification of the Constitution are valid laws because they implement all of those powers. And one of them was to coin money. And you may notice immediately preceding that power was to, which was also a mandate, was to fix standard of value of weights and measures. It had everything to do with the money because the very next power, the very next clause had to do with money, coining money. So, going to what you just said, the 1792 Coinage Act is valid law. It's still the law that applies mainly to the states, but because of Article 1, Section 10, there's a lot of continuity between the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. You can't look at them as separate documents. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, it was the Declaration of Independence that created this country, and it was the Constitution that determined how it would govern itself, and the Bill of Rights were the restrictions. The preamble in the Bill of Rights makes it very clear that those are declaratory, meaning permanent, like the Declaration of Independence, permanent and restrictive clauses. So every power exercised under the authority of the Constitution has to pass muster with the Bill of Rights. That's what that means.
Or at least
So,
it's supposed to be in
well,
keeping with the Bill of Rights.
No. If you know how to argue it, it works. The courts still recognize it, but it's a pretty narrow path you have to walk. For example, I like to point out to people that Article 4 of the Bill of Rights is probably more important in today's world than most of the other articles. And you have to also remember those were 10 articles of one amendment. It wasn't 10 amendments, it was 10 articles of one amendment. And that means what that suggests is, and I've actually dug up the paperwork on it, the states were not going to ratify the Constitution unless that Bill of Rights went in. So the Constitution, national Constitution, was conditioned on the Bill of Rights. So, are you familiar with Article 4?
Oh, not really. I hate to say it, but I never have gotten. I never have gotten them straight. I know what the second one is, but I don't know the rest of them.
Okay. Well, the fifth, of course, is criminal. That protects you from. It's intended to protect you from excessive use of power by the government. The fourth article addresses you have a right to be secure in your person, papers, houses, effects, and things. That covers just about everything you can want to imagine. So to summarize that, you have a right to be secure in your person and your property. So, do you feel secure with the Federal Reserve? Do you feel more secure with lawful money or with Federal Reserve notes?
Oh,
Not for
gosh.
me.
I don't know if I could answer that one. No, I would definitely say I would prefer lawful money to the Federal Reserve notes.
Right. So, I'm stating this in a way I hope stimulates thought processes in your head on this stuff. Just how far that can go. Now, another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that your rights. I'm going to cover a couple of things on that. You have no rights unless you exercise them. In other words, it's like money. You can use anything for money. You can use
Sheep
gold and silver coin, sheep berries, gold and silver coin, whatever you want to use for money, you can use for money. Okay?
Yes, I agree.
It's simply a medium of exchange. But it ceases to be that medium when it's not moving. If it just sits there, it reverts to back to whatever it is. Gold and silver coin is just so much metal. Sheep berries are just so much fertilizer. Federal Reserve notes are just printed paper. That's all it is. It's not money until it's moving, because it's a medium of exchange that requires movement. Does that make sense?
Yes.
When it stops moving, it's no longer money.
Okay.
So, for example, when the IRS is taxing the use of Federal Reserve notes, what are they taxing? They're taxing the movement. You wrap your head around that one?
Boing. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. Let's see. God, I spaced the other one. I'm not suffering dementia, but I am 67 years old, so sometimes I do space things. And it is a pretty big subject we're talking about.
I'll say. So I think the jumping off part started where you were saying the Fourth Amendment or the Fourth Article.
Rights. There we go. Rights. Rights don't exist except when you exercise them.
And money doesn't exist until it's in motion, until it's in exchange.
Right.
Is that the parallel you're drawing?
That's exactly right. Now, your rights, remember, a right is a statement of authority. The power associated with that right, or powers associated with that right, or how it's put into motion, how it's put into effect. So, what that means is, when it's in its potential state, in other words, unexercised, or even while it's exercised, your rights are property. They belong to you. Now, I have similar rights, but they belong to me. They don't belong to you. Your rights belong to you. They are your property. And the way to look at that from the marital point of view, Carl Lentz got into this a bit. I don't know if you know who he is or not.
Yes.
Okay, he got into this a little bit. One of his stories that he told him, this goes back a ways. I haven't listened to him for a long time, but everything and I have no disagreement with his point of view.
Wonderful.
Like in a marriage, I believe his story was that the way he put it across was he was talking to somebody, I don't know if he was in court or somewhere else, and he basically said, my wife is my property, and I'm her property. So that what that implies is the right of exclusive use. And his wife was in full agreement with that.
Lucky for him.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, he basically said that he was her property and nobody else's in that relationship. So what all this leads back to is, and it takes it back to the sovereign viewpoint, is how much are you willing to be responsible for? And I've had people say, well, what do you mean by responsible? And I say, well, it's a willingness to adopt the viewpoint that you either caused it or you allowed it to happen. That is the responsible viewpoint. And if you can't, because without that, you're not behaving like a sovereign. And that goes back to where we started all this, and that is, do you want to watch the football game or do you want to be on the field playing it? Because if you're going to be on the field playing it, you have to be responsible for what you've done.
So does that answer your question, Genevieve?
Well, I'm trying to bring it back around to to the land patent and making the offer to, well, first of all, asking them for a payout statement, asking the county for a payout statement,
right,
and making an offer of valid, lawful.
Right, I cover that in the books. One of the ways you can do that is
Okay.
using postal money orders. But I think that's in Volume 2, if I recall right.
Yeah, it isn't in Volume 1.
Okay, it's in Volume 2. Use postal money orders because they use the written out word dollars. And what I typically do, because they used to use the double bar, until I found out later that there's no legal definition for that dollar sign, on the international postal money orders, they use the double bar symbol, but there's no legal definition for that either. So, there's really not much point in it. The main thing is they spell out the amount in dollars and cents, the words, not the symbols. And there's only one legal definition for a dollar. That goes back to the Coinage Act of 1792. A dollar is defined as 371 1/4 grains of pure silver. That's the standard. And that law has never changed.
And if you were to make an offer to pay, then the only way, if they accepted that offer, which you're saying they can't.
Then they can't. But if they did, then you could hand there's a lot of people don't understand this. The tax collector is the sheriff, not the treasurer. It's not the assessor. The actual tax collector is the sheriff because he's the only one that can go out and take your property away from you. He's the only one that can sign a death certificate besides the coroner. So he's the collector. So you hand him a quitclaim deed releasing all right, title, and claim to the property, and he's signing it on behalf of the county. And then you have title. I mean, the title's yours. It's free and clear.
So,
you can't file that or register it with a title insurance company because there's nothing to insure. If you're holding the title, there's nothing for them to insure.
Right.
How often have you seen property signed off by the sheriff, or land rather?
So far, I have not seen it because I know why they can't do it. The only thing that we've been able to do is just simply have them remove the property from the tax rolls.
Does that imply that they still have a hold on your property in some way?
Well, what it amounts to is they stop sending you a bill, a tax bill, but it doesn't restrict the sheriff coming onto your property. There's only 3 exceptions that can allow the sheriff onto your property. One is if he's in hot pursuit of a fugitive. Another is by legal process. You can't stop him from coming onto your property to serve you with process. Okay, you getting the picture?
Yes.
And the other aspect is the building codes and the sanitation codes, like septic and all of that. None of those apply if you're holding the title. I mean, they have no grounds. A good example of that in California was City of Long Beach. City of Long Beach was established originally as a freehold city, and at one time I had their charter. So when the state of California tried to get them to go into debt and upgrade their sewer system and their streets and their street lights and stuff like that, City of Long Beach basically told them to go to hell. And it ended up in the courts, and it went up to the Supreme Court, and they just went in and said, we're a freehold city. The state has no jurisdiction. And the Supreme Court of California agreed with them.
Wow.
So that's the other aspect of getting a free and clear title on your property, is that all of that stuff stays outside your boundaries. You have no jurisdiction. An interesting thing, just recently here, this happened here in Idaho. Some old guy, there was problems with familial problems and drugs and all of that. Nobody knows for certain whether he committed suicide or he had a little help. But within hours, there was a deputy out there, and he was on his own property. So the deputy sheriff enlisted the help of a neighbor, brought his back over, and they buried him right there in a sheriff's body bag.
Wow.
Okay, and you can do that. They can do that, bury you on your own property if it's done within 24 hours. And the only way that the only thing that can happen after that, as far as, because the state has no jurisdiction. If you do that, the state has no jurisdiction unless some family member or somebody raises a probate question, or there's some question as to whether or not it was a natural death. They can exhume the body and do an autopsy. Otherwise, if nobody challenges it or requires the state to act, then the state has no jurisdiction.
Wow. And that's true of all states?
I don't know that. I know it's true in Idaho.
So, Tanya, where do you want to be buried? I mean, not Tanya, Genevieve.
Well,
So,
why not in the yard? Yeah.
Yeah.
The flower bed.
Or whatever. It's one of those things. Everybody dies. It's just a matter of where and when and how.
Yeah, the how is the big story.
Yeah.
The burial
So,
is secondary.
So, don't be afraid. If I still haven't answered your question, repeat it.
Oh, well, I think what I want to do is get the book from Tad, read it, and then maybe I'll be able to ask some better questions. And I don't want to hog the call, and we have been on for quite a while.
Well, so far you're the only one that had their hand raised.
Oh, well, then I'll keep going.
Yeah, if you read the book, the second book, and the property tax book, what it'll do is it will narrow your questions. Right now I'm shotgunning it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Monty, we got a question on the board.
Okay.
If a plane crashes on the Idaho-Montana border, where do they bury the survivors?
Is this a joke?
Well, you have to remember this guy was buried on his own property, so it's not a
Let me read it to you again.
It's not a direct parallel to what I was talking about.
Let me read it to you again.
Oh.
If a plane crashes on the Idaho-Montana border, where do they bury the survivors?
That depends on how hard the plane landed.
You don't bury survivors.
Wherever they can get them into the ground.
No, but you get my point.
Anyway.
If the plane hits hard enough, they're already buried.
Yeah, right. All right, well
can
I typically
ask a couple of what, Tad?
Oh, well, I was telling Monty I typically try to keep it down to about an hour.
Oh, okay.
So it's I don't like keeping this going on like 5 or 6 hours like some of these other people do that don't have a life. However, Genevieve, you have some good questions, so Monty, if you're up for that, we'll go ahead and entertain some questions here.
Sure.
Maybe just a couple of hopefully not involved questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Are you into the use of different colored inks, Monty? The red ink or the...
Well, are you talking about the Winston Trout stuff and all that?
Oh, I've heard it from more than Trout. So.
Yeah, well, that crowd, they're all in that same. They're getting into admiralty is what they're doing, and that if you want to understand admiralty, then your best source of information on that would be Judge Anna out of Alaska.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm familiar with her, and interesting. So is Winston Trout. But I've heard colored inks mentioned so many times. Don't use black. Use red. Use blue. Purple.
Don't forget gold and silver.
Yes, and gold and silver.
Well, the colors have significance in admiralty because that's how they signal between ships with different colored flags.
Okay. That's really what I need to know because I don't want to be in admiralty. So.
Well,
so
why not? There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with admiralty as long as you understand that's where you are.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you can function perfectly well in admiralty if you understand that's what you're dealing with, but don't confuse it with land law.
Well,
they're not the same. It's just like I was telling you that criminal and penal are not the same thing.
Oh, yes. Would you please explain that?
Criminal means that you can be incarcerated for whatever period of time or put to death if it's a capital crime. But penal is a penalty. That means money.
Oh.
So whenever you have they're using criminal process, the states are using criminal process to raise revenue. That's not a crime. So, and I didn't want to really do a war story, but I'll give you one because it does illustrate something. I used to, let's see, I'll think of one here. Oh, okay. I had a young officer that was probably fresh out of the academy pull me over and said, I want to see your driver's license. And I said, what's your probable cause for interfering with me? Now, when you're asking for probable cause, you're asking him to identify the crime. And you can't have a crime without a victim, and you can't have a victim without an actual injury. And there's no way in hell that you can injure a fiction, i.e., state of Oregon. I had a policeman say that one time. Well, I said, who's the victim of this alleged crime? Well, the state of Oregon. And I said, the state of Oregon's fiction. How do you injure a fiction? Yeah. Well, it's the people of the state of Oregon. Fine. Which one is claiming that I injured them?
I'll let you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, at any rate, this one incident, I said, what's your probable cause for interfering with me? And he says, well, I happen to know you don't have a driver's license. And I said, well, if you know that for a fact, why are you asking me to produce something that you know I don't have? The law doesn't require the impossible. What are you doing here? And he says, well, the statutes say I have to ask that. And I said, well, you still haven't answered my question. What's your probable cause? And he repeated it. He said, no driver's license. And I said, well, is that a crime in this state? And this incident, by the way, was in Oregon. And he said, I said, is that a crime in this state? He said, no, it's an infraction. And I said, well, then you haven't given me probable cause.
Did he understand what you were saying?
I think by the time we got done, he did. But what I try to do is I do this in a way that, some guys will take offense to it if they got a chip on their shoulder. But some of them actually listen, and they get an education out of it. In other words, what I'm letting them know is the uniform and the badge don't give you the authority. What gives you the authority is your oath to keep me secure in my constitutionally protected rights and the probable cause element. In other words, if I want my rights kept secure, then I have to exercise them responsibly, meaning that I don't injure anybody else's rights. Okay?
Yeah.
So, that's my method of teaching. Typically, it has been over the years, is if I want to engage in it. Now like in Oregon, you don't have to sign the ticket. So he said, well, wait here, because he was new to the thing, and he was still trying to mentally wrap his head around what I had just done with him. So he went back to,
love it.
And he went back to his patrol car, and he came back, and he had a citation. And now in Oregon, it says on the citation that it's a uniform traffic citation and complaint. And on the side, it's printed right on the face of it that it's a summons.
Oh.
If you ever get one again, take a look at it. Or you can go dig one out of the records, and you'll see it says summons right on the side. Well, a summons is a judicial instrument. What the hell is an executive officer doing issuing a judicial instrument? But aside from that, he never did. He got my name. Oh, and by the reason he knew my name, because I asked him that too. I said, "Do you know who I am?" And he said, "Yeah, I do know." And the reason he knew is because I just finished grilling him on the witness stand earlier that day.
Oh.
So when he did the citation, he had my name, but he didn't have any address. And they have no authority to compel you to give them information unless they can show probable cause. And if they're claiming probable cause, they have to be able to identify a real victim with a real injury.
Was he not able to get your name from your license plate or the VIN number or?
Well, he could have, but he didn't have to. He knew who I was.
But he would have been able to get your address from that, wouldn't he?
I'm not sure I had the vehicle registered in that name. I've had vehicles registered under pen names.
Oh.
And the only reason that works, and it's honorable, and it is legitimate, is because my pen names are registered with some state, a number of different states, as DBAs, doing business as.
And why would you need a DBA?
Because under the common law, if you're going to operate a business under a fictitious name, you have to notify the public that's what you're doing. And the only mechanism for that today is the DBA.
Well, then one last question, and then let Tad.
Well, one last thing.
Yes?
On this incident, because it's kind of cute in the way it ended.
Oh, great. Oh, that's
Remember
right. I didn't hear the end of the story.
Yeah, so he carefully read off the ticket, what was on it, and it was a violation of some statute, no license to drive and all this. So I went ahead and accepted the ticket from him because I wanted to do some things with him in the court. Otherwise, I would have just said, thank you, don't litter the roadside, and rolled up my window. But I'd already stopped. I was outside of a wrecking yard, so he said, well, you're going to have somebody come pick you up because you can't drive this rig without a license to drive it. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go across the street and finish my business that you interrupted. And when I'm done with that, I'm going to come back out here and get in this rig, and I'm going to go down the road, and I really don't care what you do. And he stood there for a second, and he said, well, you go that way, and I'm going to go this way, and I don't want to see you again. I said, what in the hell makes you think I want to see you again? Anyway, go ahead.
Oh, this is just a kind of an off-the-wall question about dates. Are you familiar with Curtis Kallenbach?
I've heard the name. Refresh me.
Well, he's a fellow who lives in Minnesota, I believe. Illinois. And he has been doing research into this kind of stuff for a long time. And he has come up with the concept that that the use of different calendars is messing us up and putting us by using the Anno Domini calendar. We are being operating in commerce under basically the rule of the Vatican.
Well, okay, you can take that viewpoint, but it's kind of the same thing as I said about admiralty. There's nothing wrong with operating in commerce as long as you understand that that's what you're doing.
Right, and he is saying that it's one of the ways that that they, in quotes, use to always drag us into commerce, whether we know it or not.
Right, and a cardinal rule in commerce is, if you want to really take them to the mat, is because they have to. The only way they can do what they're doing in this system today is through the use of deception.
Right.
Okay. A couple of terms you might want to familiarize yourself with again is perfidy and moral turpitude.
Nice words.
Okay. That's very powerful. If you use those words on a judge, it's very has a very profound effect.
What are the words again?
T-E-R?
Yeah, spell it.
T-E-R-F-I-D-Y.
Slowly.
Or the variation on that is perfidious.
Great word.
And
then,
moral turpitude.
And turpitude is spelled T-E-R?
T-U-R.
Oh, T-U-R. Okay. All right.
P-I. P-I. P-U-D-E.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, someone's written it out.
Now, the way you come back on that, and they say, well, you agreed to do this under commercial law or whatever, if they're even that open about it, that it's commercial law. But they're saying you agreed to it. Your best response under their rules is, I was deceived. And you're right back where they don't want to go.
Yeah, how would they answer that?
Well, you have to remember, they're operating on presumptions. So you have to reverse the presumption. That they're not coming with clean hands. There's a doctrine on that. They're not coming with in good faith, because it's predicated on fraud. It's predicated on deception. And fraud, there is no statute of limitations on.
What is that clean hands doctrine? Can you describe that in 25 words or less?
Yeah, it means you're bringing a lie into the court.
Clean hands?
Clean hands.
You come in with dirty hands. In other words, I'm accusing you of something to hide what I've done. There's a term I don't offhand recall. It starts with a D. That where the perpetrator of a crime accuses the victim of committing the crime.
Oh.
You mean Hillary Clinton?
It's a psychological term.
Yeah. Oh.
Kind of like in the same category as transference.
Deflection?
No, it's a different term than that, but it means exactly that.
I mean, he who smelt it dealt it.
I typically don't get into this kind of thing, but I call it like I see it. I call a spade a spade. It's what it's a stock and trade thing that the Zionist Jews do.
Oh. Where they're allowed to lie to the non-believers?
No, it's where they perpetrate a crime on somebody and then accuse the victim of the crime as having perpetrated it on them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can't think of what that word is either.
It's there. It starts with a D, but it's a psychological term.
All right, so Monty, are you about ready to wrap it up for the evening?
I can wrap it up or go on, whatever you want.
Well, I will say this, that you've done a very good job of holding the audience. Everybody that's logged in or called in is still here.
Oh, well, good for them.
Exactly.
I hope they learned something. I hope they got something useful from it.
And I'd also like to mention that we will probably, in the future, be holding some educational webinars for members at youhavetheright.com, so we can probably go into more depth about some of these subjects.
Something you might want to bring up. Yeah, something you might want to bring up. You did ask me about it.
Okay.
And I don't know, what was it, 3 or 4 days ago? And that was on the subject of marriage.
Yes.
How to expel the state from your marriage.
Yes.
And from your family, basically. And there's 2 or 3 different ways of going about that, and it depends on where you're oriented with regard to your religious convictions or not, et cetera, et cetera. But there are solutions to that. I did not cover that subject in the handbooks.
You did a little bit.
Well, not as far as practical application.
Okay, so one of our first webinars will be on marriage. Let's do that.
Okay, and this information, a lot of this information is, I refer to the handbooks because it acts as an orientation tool. And once you're oriented, then you're in a position to start looking at the different options that you might want to pursue on application. Because you do have choices. And by the way, the state does not have the authority to compel you to make a choice.
Well, there you go.
Well,
All right,
I'd like to say thank you before you cut me off, Tad. Thank you so much, Monty. It's very, very wonderful to be able to talk with you. Thank you again.
Well, it's been a pleasure on my part.
Oh, good.
Well, I want to see you go out and succeed with it.
I'm working on it. I'm working
okay.
on it.
Good for you.
Will you have another call next Saturday?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you. I look forward to next Saturday's call, and thank you, Tad.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're going to call it an evening, folks. You guys, thank you very much. And tell your friends about our call so we can get more people. And we'll see you again next week. Good night, everybody.